The Constitution of the Philippines is the Constitution or supreme law of the Republic of the Philippines. Its final draft was completed by the Constitutional Commission on October 12, 1986 and was ratified by a nationwide plebiscite on February 2, 1987. So, a constitution provides the basic for governance in a country, which is essential to making sure that everyone's interests and needs are addressed. It determines how laws are made and details the process by which the government rules. First is adoption, promulgation, and amendments. The Constitution is promulgated by the sovereign Filipino people. Any amendment to or revision of this Constitution may be proposed by the Congress upon a vote of 3/4 of all its members or Constitutional Convention. So, structure of the Constitution. The Constitution is divided into 18 articles: National Territory, Declaration of Principles and State Policies Principles, Bill of Rights, Citizenship, Suffrage, Legislative Department, Executive Department, Judicial Department, Constitutional Commissions, Local Government, Accountability of Public Officers, National Economy and Patrimony, Social Justice and Human Rights, Education, Science and Technology, Arts, Culture and Sports, the Family, General Provisions, Amendments or Revisions, Transitory Provisions. Form of government and basic principles of the state. So the government is a democratic and republican state. So governed by the rule of law, sovereignty resides in the people, and all government authority emanates from them. Civilian authority is at all times supreme over the military. The separation of church and state shall be inviolable. The state ensures the autonomy of local governments. Basic institutions of the state and the rule of law. The legislative power shall be vested in the Congress of the Philippines, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives, except to the extent reserved to the people by the provision on initiative and referendum. Supremacy of international law in the Philippines. Renounced this was an instrument of national policy. Adopts the generally accepted principles of international law as part of the law of the land and adheres to the policy of peace, equality, cooperation, and amity with all nations.
The Philippines Constitution 1899. The political constitution of 1899, informally known as the Malolos Constitution of the First Philippines Republic, written by Felipe Calderon, Y. Roca, and Felipe Buencamino. The first Republican Constitution in Asia was adopted of the First Philippine Republic. It is written in Spanish, which was the official language of the Philippines at the time.
Philippine Constitution 1935. So, the Philippine Constitution, whether written or unwritten, is recognized as the supreme law of the land, as it serves as the basis of the legitimacy of any governmental acts necessary for its existence. Right after the signing of the Treaty of Paris in Washington in 1898, that ceded the Philippines to the U.S., paying of the amount $2 million to Spain in the process, and the eruption of Filipino-American War in 1899. Our country was placed under a military government until 1901 with the passing of the Spooner Amendment, putting an end to the military rule in the Philippines and replacing it with a civil government with William H. Taft as the first civil governor. So, controversy divided the Philippine legislature with the debate on the acceptance or rejection of the hair hose cutting bill brought home by Osmeña Rojas' mission from the U.S. Congress in 1931, which provided for a 10-year transition period before the granting of Philippine independence. On October 17, 1933, Quezon and others triumphed in this battle as the Philippine legislature rejected the bill. So, the organization of Constitutional Convention that would draw up the fundamental law of the land basis on the American model was one of the salient provisions of the Tidings-McDuffie Act. And the 1935 Constitution, which featured a political system virtually identical to the American one, became operative. The system called for a president to be elected at large for a 4-year term a bicameral Congress, and an independent judiciary.
The 1973 Constitution of the Philippines, as amended on October 16 to 17, 1976, on January 30, 1980, and April 7, 1981. The 1973, composed of a preamble and 17 articles, provides for the shift from presidential to parliamentary system of government. The Constitution vests the legislative power in the National Assembly. Preamble. We, the sovereign Filipino people, imploring the aid of divine providence in order to establish a government that shall embody our ideals, promote the general welfare, conserve and develop the patrimony of our property, the blessings of democracy under a regime of justice, peace, liberty, and equality, do ordain and promulgate this Constitution. So now, let's proceed to the 17 articles. First article would be the national territory. The national territory comprises the Philippine archipelago with all the islands and waters embraced therein, and all the other territories belonging to the Philippines by historic or legal time. Second article, the declaration of the principles and state policies. The state shall promote social justice to ensure the dignity, welfare, and security of all the people. Toward this end, the state shall regulate the acquisition, ownership, use, enjoyment, and disposition of private property, and equitably diffuse property ownership and profits. Third article, the citizens. The following are the citizens of the Philippines. Those who are citizens of the Philippines are at the time of the adoption of this Constitution. Second, those whose fathers or mothers are citizens of the Philippines. Third, those who elect Philippine citizenship pursuant to the provision of the Constitution of the 1935. And lastly, those who are naturalized in accordance with the law. Fourth article, the Bill of Rights. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures of whatever purpose